Welcome in, everybody, to the PFF College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Galina, PFF_Seth. Another great podcast that we had on one of the better college football players of the past 20 years. Of course, I'm talking about PFF's own Eric Eager, who played tight end at Minnesota State Moorhead. And by the way, we have BCS national champion starting quarterback Greg McElroy on the program also. So honestly, two fantastic football conversations, I think, with those two guys separately. With Greg, we talked about his favorite plays that he ran. Of course, Fort Worth's, the best play in football. And we talked about some SEC stuff and how the air raid is going. And a little bit of Bo Nix, and then with the good doctor Eric Eager, we talked about some of the lines he's looking at this week, some of the teams he likes in the future for college football betting purposes, and we just talked about football, like analytics in football, how his playing career went, as I believe the school's Division II, so as a Division II tight end. And honestly, just super fun conversations, and I'm excited to have you guys listen to it. I'm joined now by the doctor, Eric Eager, PFF_Eric, to talk college football and to talk betting in the college football world. But first, like I do with every guest, Eric, you at least grew up, I believe, a Nebraska fan. So you can take as much time as you want here, but what is the path to Nebraska winning a national title this season?
Oh my gosh. Well, I grew up in Minnesota actually, and I went to high school, undergrad in Minnesota, and then to get my PhD, I went to the University of Nebraska Lincoln.
Okay.
And it's interesting. So I was always a huge NFL fan, but as you can imagine, growing up in Minnesota Golden Gopher territory, there was never much in the way of success.
Are you telling me that the Minnesota Golden Gophers haven't been a good football program for the past 30 years?
I remember them beating, in 1999, I remember them beating Penn State on the road when Penn State was the second ranked team in the league, in the entire nation. That was a game. I remember Asad Abdul-Khalik playing quarterback for them. I remember Billy Cockrum was another name. But the funniest thing was, I was a high school football player, and then there was a random game where the Gophers, this was long before like Thursday and Friday night college football was a thing. And the Gophers played Michigan, which they play, this weekend. And the Gophers blew like a 35-point second half lead and lost the game. And I want to say they finished like 8-3 that year. So they would have been like New Year's Bowl eligible or something had they even like just won that game. And then, they beat the Badgers in like 2003 and then went all the way until 2018, beat them again. So like that. So let's just say when I went to Nebraska Lincoln, I had no attachments. And then, I went there and I was immediately struck by how rabid this fan base was. And I thought to myself, I'm like, I've been to one Nebraska game, and that was after I graduated. I never went to one game when I went to school there because I felt like I didn't deserve it. I felt like I didn't earn the fandom requisite of going to that game. But it was something. And when I was there, I was in student government, and it was one of those where we were transitioning from the Big 12 to the Big 10. And I remember the whole time, every single initiative we had was, okay, we need to become a Big 10 institution. We need to become a Big 10 institution. Well, you fast forward to 2020, and it's funny and sad that we are upset that we have to face Wisconsin and Ohio State in the first two games. Like that's somehow unfair. Nebraska, a 3-time national champion in the 90s, is now upset about having to play Ohio State and Wisconsin. So, Seth, to answer your question, I don't see a path for Nebraska to win the national championship anytime soon.
Okay, great. And that's the end of the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks to Eric. What's funny? Minnesota, they look like they're back on the upswing, I guess, with PJ Fleck and everything going on there. But those teams you talked about, the quarterback that you mentioned, they had NFL running backs, Marion Barber, Lawrence Maroney. They were churning out like a nice ground game, and it's almost like, you see these teams that that stay above water because they do interesting things. And they were, I have to go watch some highlights, but it's like, I don't know if they were a true triple option team. They might have been, but they were just like a heavy personnel, like we're going to grind it out type of thing. And it was kind of fun to watch. I mean, maybe I'm being a little nice,
they had Barber, who was a 3rd round pick, and then they had Lawrence Maroney as 1st round pick. They had Gary Russell, who was who scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They also had my high school teammate Jay Thomas, who had some moments and tore his ACL, I think, before he could be truly good, but he was like the Minnesota Metro Player of the Year. And they were a running back university for a long time. And then now it seems like obviously Tyler Johnson scored a touchdown the other day for Tampa Bay, and you have Rashad Bateman, who is opting back in. With Tanner Morgan, they're a pass first team now. And interestingly, when you look at their game this weekend, I was talking about this with Ben Brown on our PFF betting podcast. They're 3-point underdogs at home to Michigan, but it's going to be like the first ever opening day game for a team that's in 30-degree weather.
Oh, that's wild. And Michigan's starting a new quarterback as well, so that's very interesting. Actually, before we get into more betting stuff, I wanted to talk to you about. Oh wait, did they have Minnesota had a tight end too? Maybe 1 or 2 tight ends who played in the NFL.
Yeah, Matt Spaeth.
Matt Spaeth. There you go.
Yeah, and they had Esslinger. They had some linemen that made it too. Like Esslinger was the one name, and I think they had another lineman that made. Yeah. They had some. They also had Ben Utek, I want to say, was a tight end that played for the Colts. So they had 2 good tight ends. So they were actually, and then, you had Ron Johnson, the wide receiver that ended up playing for Baltimore. They had some talent there. They've never had a quarterback, unfortunately, until this year.
Yeah.
But yeah, they had some decent talent. They also had a 1st round pick named Willie Middlebrooks, who played corner for the Denver Broncos. In the Wayback Machine. But yeah, that was sort of the extent of my Gopher knowledge.
Okay, so I wanted to talk about a little bit about your playing career. You played tight end at at Minnesota State Moorhead. Am I getting that correctly? Am I getting the pronunciation correctly?
Yeah. There's 2 Minnesota States in Minnesota. One is Mankato, where the Vikings used to have training camp. That's where Adam Thielen went, and that's in the same conference as Minnesota State Moorhead, where I went, as well as the former head coach of the Chicago Bears and Tampa Bay Vipers, Mark Trestman, as well. Montreal Alouettes for you.
Thank you.
And yeah, so we have Dave Yeager, the former coach of the Memphis Grizzlies, also played basketball there. So we have a weird, like, and I guess if you count me. We have a weird
we don't have to count you.
We're not counting me. So we have some people that ended up with careers in sports, but like mostly it's kind of a lower tier Division II school. I was a wide receiver in high school, as bigger, 6'3", 200 pounds. I was probably topped out at a 4'6", so they wanted me to play tight end. And so I sat 2 years on the bench, kind of transitioning from wide receiver to tight end. Those 2 years I sat on the bench, we were a combined 1-20. And then I started my junior year at tight end and senior year at tight end, and we went, I believe, a combined like 10-12, 6-5 in one of those years. So it was a fun time. We had four offensive coordinators in 4 years and 3 head coaches in 3 years. It was a kind of a tumultuous situation, but I had a lot of fun playing football.
What type of offense? Okay, I guess you have 4 different offensive coordinators, but like in the year. So when you started your junior year, what type of system were you guys running in regards to your position, like playing tight end? Were you split out a lot? Were you in line? Was it a zone scheme? Were you pulling? Like, what was going on?
Yeah, we played a spread offense. So I probably played about 40% of the snaps, even as the lead tight end. A lot of it was, I'd be the backside of trips, pass blocking, leaking out and stuff. I would be, I would play a little bit of H, which is basically kind of like either like a wing or kind of an offset fullback. And I did a decent amount of pulling, especially my first year where, I'd sneak behind the guard and get a hit on a linebacker on like a counter play or something like that. And, those were pretty fun. I wasn't the biggest guy. I was just 6'3", about 230. So some of my, I would always obviously prefer playing 3-4 teams than 4-3 teams, but But by the end of the time, I got pretty good at sort of understanding the angles and those types of things to be able to even block, like a 6-eye, which is, I think, the toughest assignment for a tight end on the front side of a play. But yeah, it was, and I caught 13 balls. I wasn't much of a receiver. I did have 3 touchdowns my senior year.
Can you remember the touchdown plays?
Well, so one of them was all of them were on play action. One of them was like
this is why you've given the world all this knowledge on play action now in your adult life because of your.
I have a story about me understanding analytics from playing. But so the first one was against Wayne State, Nebraska, where it was a 6-hour drive. Wayne State's where Byron Chamberlain, the former tight end for the Vikings, Pro Bowl tight end, played. And I caught a TD in the back of the end zone off play action in that game. The following week was our homecoming game, and I was on the backside of trips, and we had always run this sort of like roll right and had kind of the 3 receivers do some combination, and I was always the backside blocker. And then of course we ran the waterfall screen to me once, and I was no one around me for 20 yards, so that was a kind of a fun touchdown. And then I was wide open for a game-winning touchdown against Winona State, which is the best team in our conference, and the quarterback missed me, and the other team drove down and scored. So I feel like I could have had touchdowns in 4 straight games. But then I also am the recipient of a negative 8-yard catch on the same waterfall screen because the other team had scouted it, and I got nailed on the same play. So you can go to that well once, but not twice.
Right. So what was the story about learning analytics while playing?
So, when you're a spread, and when you're a spread team, I always, at 22 years old, this is, 13 years ago or whatever, but I always thought that we ran the ball better with me in the game, because I was a decent blocker. I always graded well in our system and all this kind of stuff. But I remember watching a game.
Oh, wait, was PFF grading Minnesota State Moorhead at that time?
No, but I think we were going to grade a Moorhead State game this year because they had somebody in that conference was
right. Okay.
Anyway, but they canceled Division II this year. But there was a game where I remember the defense was look, I can make this block 9 times out of 10, and I'm a really good player that way. But when we play 4 wide receivers and do doubles, that linebacker isn't even close to making that play, and no one has to block him. And I'm thinking to myself, why the hell? What is my point here? If I'm not as good of a receiver as this slot guy, which I wasn't, and I'm not 100% able to make this block, which I'm not on this play, am I just window dressing? I had this thought about wow, and I didn't tell anybody because I still wanted to play, but I was kind of what is my point here? What am I doing? And I feel like that's an interesting thing, right? Because we're part of a company where we're okay, this position matters, this position doesn't matter, but there's the human aspect of it that's something that maybe we gloss over a little bit too much. And I felt it in my own playing career, which is just oh, I can see now why I only play 40% of snaps, because the numbers just don't make sense with me in the game. And it's not that I'm bad or anything. It's just we're trying to gain the most yards possible. It was sort of this eerie experience.
I'm not sure how related this comment I'm about to make is, but I remember being in these coaches meetings, not even that long ago, let's say 2010, 2011, something like that. And we dropped these run plays. And the idea was, especially if it was a 1 high system where the second safety was down in the box, it would be a situation where this happened all the time. And I'm sure it happened everywhere all across North America. But you would draw the play up, and then you wouldn't block the backside linebacker or the backside safety. And you'd be you know what? If he makes the tackle, we're already 5 yards down the field. And it's wait, why don't we just read him? And if he tries to make the tackle, we throw the ball on a slant behind his head. And it's the same thing. We just lived in this world without ever realizing it. And it's the same with in the pre-spread days, especially, man, running the ball. I had an O-line coach who, one of my favorite guys that I've had the chance to coach with, but his thing was always, I want to start, install in empty, because I want my offensive line, I want everything to everyone to understand what they have to do, just them. You're not clogging up with anything. And I think that kind of goes into like now like a one back spread team where it's like, wait, like you said, wait, that Sam is now not that Sam who was 6'4", 250, whatever. Well, he's got to cover a slot now. Like that's
right.
That's great.
He looks completely ridiculous out here. Whereas the first thing he wants to do in the world is beat the hell out of a tight end. You know, like and now he's stuck, you know, having to move his feet around a little bit, and it's crazy. Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's that great story about, I think it was Kobayashi, right, with the hot dog eating contest, where he said, like, you know, they were like, well, why do you beat the record by 20 hot dogs? It was like an enormous amount of hot dogs. He's like, well, I never like looked at the record to begin with. You know, there's a huge, and for people like us, I feel like you and I are the same. You grow up loving football, right? Like you love the game, you know. And there's so much about the game that's sacred to people like you and me. And it's like, and it's hard to just strip it down and say, well, are we actually doing this right? You know, could we think about this differently? And you know, sometimes it takes outsiders, you know, and I think that's what, you know, PFF is, you know, is in many ways known for, looking at the game differently and thinking, like, why don't we tear it down and think about it this way? And could we get a tactical advantage in doing so?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the coverage versus, and it's funny because once we put it on paper, you know, and the stuff that you do in the data science department, once we put it down on paper and then I read it, I'm like, oh yeah, of course. It's like, oh yeah, we've known this for 100 years, but it's like no one like almost no one just sees it. And I think the coverage versus pass rush thing is the same thing, where it's like, you know. I learned this actually later in my life playing flag football, because the rush is always the same. Like it's a constant. Obviously, the speed of the rusher can change a little bit, whatever, but it's a constant thing because you don't have an offensive line in front of you. And I'm like, I'm dropping back there and I'm thinking, I don't care about the rusher. Like right now, I'm just if I get the ball off, then who cares? And then I was like, oh, then you guys put it in more scientific words than I ever could. And yeah, it makes so much sense to me. With that stuff. So did you have a route? Like you're like, yo, I am the best post runner. I am the best corner runner. I can always catch it over this shoulder. Like what was something you clung to, and maybe that you're still clinging to in your older age?
Well, I was very good at like a 5 or 6 yard stick route. Like I remember, and again, like I said, I didn't catch that many balls. I wasn't targeted that much. I was mostly a blocker. But what was really fun, I thought, was, you know, we were my junior year, we were 5-5, and we always played a game at the Metrodome back when the Metrodome was a thing. And like growing up, you know, watching Vikings games, this was like the coolest thing ever to me. And there was a game where their coverage was very soft in that sort of like intermediate area. And it wasn't in the game plan, but like my offensive coordinator was like, hey, look, Eric, we're going to throw you the ball on this stick route, you know, a number of times. And I remember I picked up like 3 first downs in that game just on that route, including like basically the game clinching catch, which was kind of like, you know, as somebody who wasn't really involved, like we had a receiver on our team that had 95 catches. Like we had, you know, wow. Even somebody as confident as I could be in my own abilities, I had to be like, look, like if I'm choosing between throwing the ball to Jabari or me throwing the ball to Jabari, I'm not throwing the ball to Eric. But there was like a little bit of a play there where I thought I was really good at sort of stemming that route and picking up yards after the catch and stuff. Like that was obviously, you know, my favorite. I never got this route because, again, I thought there were other players that were better than me at running it, but I always loved a corner out of the tight end position. I think that, you know, if I was maybe a little bit more athletic, I probably could have made a little bit on that. But, yeah, I mean, you know, growing up a wide receiver, like my favorite route as a wide receiver was always the big guy fade. You know, I grew up in Minnesota, you had Moss and Marcus Robinson and, you know, those guys. And, like, I love nothing more than just, like, high pointing a football. That would, you know, in my younger days playing wide receiver, that was always my favorite.
Yeah, the route that every receiver thinks he's open on every single time the ball is snapped. So when you made a point about like, so you're talking about this game and in the Metrodome, and your offensive coordinator, your coaches kind of adjust on the fly. And I was talking about this with some other people recently, and I think this, like, so you've been on the sideline. It is the most stressful place you can be for 3 hours on any given week. It is insane. Someone asked me what it's like coaching football. And I said, well, have you ever clenched your butt cheeks together for 3 straight hours? And that's pretty much what it is.
By the way, it's the same feeling betting on the Falcons.
Yeah, that's something I don't know anything about. So I guess what I'm curious of your thoughts on is, like, we look at all these bad decision making, whether it's in the NFL and college, even from like a macro perspective, 2-point conversions, going for a 4th down, punting, all this type of stuff, run pass ratio, play action ratio, whatever. Do you think this is why we need someone, maybe not in a schematic sense, but like I said, in the macro level, like just taking a step back, whose butthole is not clenched for 3 hours, they can take a deep breath and say, hey, this is what we should be doing right now. Even if the coach is the smartest man in the world, it's just hard. It's hard. Like, it's being 100%. On the sideline is hard. So yeah, I guess that's my question, is like, do we need someone like that?
Well, and the guy that I was talking about, the made adjustments, name's Tyler Fenwick. I believe he's the head coach at one of the directional Missouri schools now. He's terrific. And I had 4 offensive coordinators. The first 2 sucked. He took a 1-20 team and made them a good enough offense to go 6-5. So of course he got a head coaching job the next year, and we had to go back to somebody who wasn't quite as good the following year. And the thing about coaching is there's so much involved, because I remember being on that team and willing to run through a bus for this guy. And then the following year we had an offensive coordinator. You know how this is how I knew Sarkisian would never work in Atlanta, because we had an offensive coordinator said, I'm going to keep things the same. Nothing's broken. But like, that's not your offense. And so like there were all these like secondary rules, right? That I'd be like, well, that's actually not how the secondary rule works. It's like, well, can we just make it like that for this year? And I'm like, yeah, but you're calling an offense in the heat of the battle that, like, you're speaking another language, right? Like if I'm trying to speak, French to you, like I'm not going to be as quick and I'm not going to be as witty, and I'm not, and like, I feel like calling somebody else's offense is that way, right? And so you have that, and then what would happen would be anytime we had a 3 and out, we'd go off on the sideline and we would complain about the call. And it's like, well, dude, you gave up pressure on the interior on that play, and that's why we missed this play. And so like coaching is so interesting, because not only do you need to be tactfully good, and you have to have some originality, you have to understand what you're doing inside and out. You also need to have buy-in from your players, because football is too difficult, physical, too fast for there to be a relent at all in the minds of any of your players. And then, to your point here, you have to understand the evolving nature of the game. You have to be a step ahead. I'm thinking about Mike Vrabel, and I really want this to be true. I don't know if it is, but like, this is like the promise of PFF and what we try to do for our team clients. If Vrabel is not spending 80 hours a week grinding film or finding cut-ups or whatever, he can spend those hours, because we know they're going to anyway. He can spend those hours dreaming up these scenarios in games. And that's really where I think the value in one of the values in analytics is simply taking stuff off the coach's plate, right? Like, we talk to running back coaches who are like, hey, can you give me every single time Anthony Barr rushed against a running back in this game? And it's like 2 clicks. They used to take him 3 hours. And it's like, okay, now those 3 hours, take that and think about the game a little bit, right? Think about evolving the game.
The other thing I would say is take that and go to sleep.
Well, sure, yeah.
That's a whole other thing.
I remember there was a former NFL coach who was an offensive line coach at the time. We said, hey, you could spend a little bit more time with your wife. He's like, I don't like my wife. so in a pragmatic sense, like they're going to be spending these 80 hours a week on something. Yeah. And it's clear that like the Rabels of the world are thinking about weird edge cases for the game. And that's awesome. I think so many of these other teams are so swamped in the minutia of things and in whatever, that maybe that, like, you know what I'm saying? Like that intuition isn't there. And you're not going to get that intuition by being a coach. The sample's too low, right? Like you're coaching 16 games a year, 20 if you're lucky. you don't get the feedback, right? And you can play Madden and all that kind of stuff. You can do all that, but like really in reality, some of these tacticians should be sort of iterating these things to themselves, before the games happen. I don't think that many do.
That reminds me of one of my favorite stories that I heard, and I wasn't there. It was like the school that I ended up coaching at. Before I got there, was apparently the head coach would bring his dad on the sidelines, and then there was apparently like a fourth down situation. Well, okay, it was Canada, so it was a third down situation. But and then they didn't know, and he was like, everyone's like stressed out and didn't know what to do, and it was like, do we go for it? Do we punt it, or a field goal, or whatever it was? And then he turned to his dad, who's like, doesn't show up to practice, like it's just a dad on the sideline, and he goes, Dad, what do we do? And the dad goes, you gotta go for it, man. And then they went for it and they didn't get it. So like that, yeah, anyways, I just wanted to say that story. Yeah, I agree. I think more time dedicated to things that help you, because like one of the problems is, and I felt this way for coaching for so long, is like, we don't fix problems because we assume every problem is an execution problem.
Yes.
Oh, we're not running the ball well because we can't block it up. Like we gotta go get on the sled and practice. Like we're not blocking it up. It's like, no, well, they have an extra guy in there, so maybe we can do something, like that type of situation. And I think, yeah, with the work that we do and other, like team, the team's analytical departments, like just taking some stuff off their plate, making it less stressful during the game, giving some tasks to other people during the game, so you don't have to be that way. Especially if you're a play caller. Like, I don't know, I have no clue how Sean Payton does it. Being a play caller and making these decisions and stuff like that. I don't know how you feel about this. We're getting into the NFL territory. It's all right. So I've watched the Saints for so long. It's my favorite team. They've always been on the forefront of fourth down, going for it on fourth down, right? My thing is, I don't know if it's necessarily like, Sean Payton is like in tune with the analytics. I just think he's a cocky son of a bitch, and he says, my offense is better than yours. Oh, we're just gonna go for it. So it's like, yeah, I think like there needs to be someone to just chill and like we'll get through this without stressing everyone out like that. Okay, let's get into this week. College football betting. Who are the teams? What are the lines? Who are the sides? I'm using words here that I don't know what they mean, but what are these? What are the over unders, middles that you like this weekend?
Well, last week we had such a fun week in that we got a game every single day, right? I remember Wednesday last week I got to watch the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers upset.
Great games, by the way, during the week.
The Louisiana Lafayette.
Is that what they're calling? That's what they're calling themselves.
That's what I call it. So I'm going to go back to the well, actually, because, I don't see an edge much on Arkansas State versus Appalachian State, which is tomorrow night. But I do think the UAB Blazers, Friday night, 8 o'clock, 1-point favorites against Louisiana Lafayette. I love the Blazers in this spot. I think Levi Lewis is a fun quarterback to watch. It's always kind of cool to have a left-handed player at the position, but I don't think he gets it done. UAB, Seth, UAB is one of the best defenses in the entire country. No qualifiers, right? Like no,
they're really good. They're really good. Yeah.
We have them third ranked in the entire country. Now that probably has a lot to do with some of these SEC defenses are garbage out loud, right? We haven't seen any Big Ten teams. So, UAB's played a number of games, so we're off their prior a little bit. But yeah, I kind of like this game. I kind of like UAB on Friday night. That's one that we talked about also on the PFF betting podcast.
With the highly volatile Tyler Johnson.
Yeah, College Jameis is what I call him.
Yeah, College, exactly. As we all call him, College Jameis.
College Jameis, which, there's a number of good games. I think Minnesota-Michigan. I think Minnesota's probably the right side in that game. Let me talk about one more. I also like now Hawaii, a little bit of a rough, off season this year. 4-point underdogs at Fresno. I kind of like Hawaii in that spot.
Oh, that's interesting. That's a new offense. I had their wide receiver coach Brendan Marion on the podcast. a few weeks ago. That to me is one of the interesting things. It's kind of like the end of an era. We'll see the run and shoot in Washington State with Rolovich going there, but Hawaii is not going to be like, I think they're all, Todd Graham and Brennan and those guys are all Gus Malzahn disciples. So it's a very different offense we're going to see out of the Rainbow Warriors on throughout the season at 3:00 in the morning when we all watch the Hawaii team. Okay, you talked about like the SEC defenses and then comparing them to when we haven't seen the Big Ten defenses yet. I wrote an article I think last week about the SEC defenses and how maybe we've allowed defenses, and this could go through all football. We've allowed defenses to look good because the offenses didn't want to do anything. They wanted to play SEC football. They wanted to play what still is Big Ten football, which is, tight ends and line up and I form and run the football. Obviously, there's more spread now, but teams are still running the football. And now it's like, well, the Big 12 threw the ball for so long, spread it out and threw the ball for so long. We made jokes about the Big 12 defenses, but maybe it was like defense is kind of like, we believe that defense is independent of offense. And it's like, I'm kind of thinking like, no, the offense kind of dictates everything that goes on a football game. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, that's like, we get in trouble for saying, the flippant part, which is defense doesn't matter, but like defense is an amalgamation of the offenses that they face, and it might just very well be that the SEC is a collection of really, really solid offenses, and the defenses are sort of at the mercy there. I mean, do we all believe that Alabama's defense sucks? I don't think so. I think it's a bunch of good football players, but Ole Miss when they're playing well, and also when Alabama knows that they can score at will against Ole Miss, like it's just a different game, right? I mean, you're going to relent a little bit more, and yes, teams get caught, in these situations. LSU twice already this year.
We're not talking about it.
Get caught in a game where they allow too much stuff. But do we really think UCF and Memphis are bad defenses? Yeah, I think so. But the offenses are also just flat out amazing with some really good tactical, approaches, right? It's so hard. Do we think the defenses in the Big Ten are awesome, or do we think that Brian Lewerke sucks, right? I think Brian Lewerke sucks. So do we really give a ton of credit to, the Rutgerses of the world when they hold them to 30 points? You know what I'm saying? It is an offense's game currently, I would say.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I especially love your assessment on Brian Lewerke. Very succinct and beautiful thoughts on a former Michigan State quarterback. So, is there anything else that you're looking at in terms of the Pac-12 coming back? Who's your team that you like in the Pac-12 when they come back to play?
Yeah. What do you think about continuity? Because I'm a fan of what Rolovich, I'm a fan of the run and shoot in college. I think it didn't work. Our colleague Solomon Wilcots was part of a defense that killed the run and shoot in the NFL because you were able to do the zone blitz and those option routes from the slot were no longer as easily viable. But in the college football world, the run and shoot can work, right? And Washington State to me always has good defensive players. And the offense, and we're seeing it right now with Mississippi State, the offense that Leach runs just stalls out way too much. The best games in Leach's offense are so fun to watch, and the worst games are pulling my teeth out, right? And if they could get sort of more consistency there, I feel like they could be a contender, in that division.
Well, and I think one of the things is when you look at Washington State, and I made this point earlier on the podcast with Greg McElroy, it's the air raid in that sense, the Mike Leach air raid, which is very different than his disciples, what his disciples have done. But the Mike Leach pure air raid might have actually been dead for a few years, but Pac-12 defenses have been letting it, stay alive for a bit. And what the run and shoot does is it's a little more balanced. They will run the football. And it won't be, Mike Leach is 80-20, and they are certainly not that high. And in today's game, you need to force the defense to give you a fourth. The second time I'm saying this on the pod, but you need to force the defense to give you a fourth defensive lineman because you don't want to have to play against drop eight coverage all the time. And the run and shoot does that because they do run the football quite a bit more. They do run a lot of quarterback zone reads and stuff like that. Like they will force you to play more traditional defense. And then, like you said, I mean, it's one of the most fun offenses to watch. I really studied it this year because of Cole McDonald, but it's like, it is true backyard football. It is true.
Yeah.
You know, the backside of every concept is like, run 10 yards or run 8 yards and then look where there's open space. Like, and then by the time the quarterback gets to his backside reads, you're going to find a place that's open and it'll get you the ball. So yeah, I'm excited to see that offense in a situation where that will play up better than the air raid against the Huskies of Washington. And that is,
well, it forces you to be fit. Like, the thing about I'm on a radio show with Bobby Hebert every week, who ran the run and shoot when he was on it with Atlanta, and their back then was Greg Ironhead Hayward, right? And you know, Warren Moon's running back in Houston was Lorenzo White and Gary Brown, and Barry Sanders ran in the run and shoot with Detroit, and it was like, you know, with the exception of Sanders, all those running backs were big physical backs, and Hawaii last year had Dayton Fuyuricha, right, who was like 250 pounds. And again, like, it forces you, it's weird to say this because the offense feels finesse, but it forces your linebackers to be sturdy against the run. Because if you're running, 5-on-4, and the middle linebacker there and dime, right? And you're not physical, and you're just rushing up the field and, getting to, tackling the running back on the way. Those big running backs are not tackled the running back on the way able, right? And that, like, I think is a little bit different than when you looked at, Washington State over the years. It was Borghi, who is a good back. Don't get me wrong, like, he's great. James Williams was I think a pretty good back. I thought he'd be a better in the pros. He didn't end up catching on, but like, it doesn't force the other team's defense to get out of finesse football, which is, I think, a limitation of that offense.
And again, I'm saying this for the second time, but it's like defenses have become lighter and lighter and lighter over the years, especially now with all the 3 high safety stuff that we're seeing, that it's almost like every team is running it now. Like, you kind of have to find a way to have a vertical running game. And that's certainly not the case right now with what's going on at Mississippi State. And if Pac-12 defenses had done what Washington had done over the years and only rushed 3 guys, I'm not even sure if Mike Leach gets this job, but that's a whole nother story. Anyways, I just want to thank you for coming on, Eric. This was a blast, and we'll have to do it again sometime.
Always fun to talk football. Always fun to talk football.
All right, see you, Eric. All first-time depositors at Monkey Knife Fight that put at least $20 into their account while using promo code PFF will receive a free PFF Edge annual subscription. So that's a $40 value for just $20. And you'll get that opportunity to turn that $20 into even more money playing daily fantasy football and prop games at one of the fastest growing fantasy sports sites in the USA, in Monkey Knife Fight. Go to Monkey Knife Fight and deposit your $20 with promo code PFF today to receive your free PFF Edge annual subscription. PFF and Sunday Night Football's Chris Collinsworth is teaming up with one of the best players on and off the field, 49ers All-Pro cornerback Richard Sherman. The Chris Collinsworth podcast featuring Richard Sherman is available now wherever you find your podcast. They will provide the most interesting football conversation in sports every week. And sometimes that means the discussion will venture off the field too. Additionally, Chris will be taking a dive into the game of football as he sees it, inviting in the best and brightest to talk about everything that is happening in the great game of football. Mark your calendars. You do not want to miss the best 60 minutes of insight this season. MooseFit is a premium online workout program and remote coaching service that provides you with daily workouts based on your goals, the time you have available, and the equipment that you have at your disposal. Purchase your MooseFit membership and a MooseFit coach will reach out to you with a questionnaire. Based on the information provided in the questionnaire, your MooseFit coach will either assign a pre-made program to you or will create your custom program for you. No 2 programs are the same. MooseFit is well equipped to help provide you with daily workouts that will help you reach your health and fitness goals. For PFF listeners, Use code PFF50 and receive 50% off your first month. For more information, check them out on Instagram at moosefit or on their website, www.moosefit.com. I'm joined now by former national champion and current ESPN color commentator, Greg McElroy. Greg, welcome to the PFF College Football Podcast.
Appreciate it, man. Glad to be with you.
Okay, so I want to take you back to 2009. SEC championship game in Atlanta, playing against Florida. You're under center, split zone to Trent Richardson. You give the ball. He gets stuffed inside. He bounces it out, and then you're there to make a big block to spring him for a few extra yards. And then you flex at the Florida sideline. Is that the greatest moment of your life?
No, not the greatest moment, but a pretty natural reaction to the emotions of that game. Had to flex at Tebow. I mean, that's what it came down to. He's all jacked up and all bicepped out. I, for one, am a little bit leaner, a little bit more wiry, a little bit more built like, your traditional quarterback body. So you wouldn't normally flex, but it was a good moment just to show a little toughness, to bow up a little bit.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, look, if I was in your situation, I would have done the same thing. I would have done it very subtly and then scurried back to my own sideline into the huddle, surrounded by the bigger guys. But then I think it was a good move. So what I do on the podcast every week is I ask my guests how their favorite team or how their alma mater what's the path to winning a national championship. So we had like Alex Kirshner talk about Pitt. We had Alyssa Lang talk about South Carolina. I don't think it'll be that hard for you to tell me how Alabama is going to win the national championship, but what is the path? Like I think it's pretty straightforward though.
Yeah, it's relatively simple. I mean, Alabama's been there so many times. I would like to see them be a little bit better against basically the run. And then they've given up far too many explosive plays to this point of the season, but that's nitpicking a bit. I mean, Alabama's among the nation's elite every year. And this year is no different. Their passing game's rolling and clicking on cylinders that it hasn't clicked on in quite some time, even though last year with Tua at the helm, they were remarkably good. But Mac Jones is seeing the field beautifully, is throwing the ball really nicely down the field, and his wide receivers done a really good job of separating, including John Mechie, who was kind of an unknown heading into the year, but now has found a role as that number 3 wide receiver. But when everyone focuses their attention on Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith, having a great number 3 is a pretty wonderful thing to have. So it's been fun to watch up to this point. They just got to keep doing what they do. And at this moment, given the fact that they took down with a relative ease the number 3 ranked team in the country last week in the second half, and they just pounded them into submission there as the game went along, I don't think that there's going to be somebody that can step up and play with Alabama if Alabama has their A game. Now, I think Clemson can, but that would be the only team, and they are clearly obviously not on the schedule. So in order for someone to beat Alabama at this moment, Alabama's going to have their B minus game, and then the other team's going to have their A game. So it's still very possible, but this team has clearly shown when they're on their game, they're going to be really, really tough to beat, if not impossible to beat.
When you look at the way that, Sarkisian runs his offense, are you ever just like, man, I would love to have played in what they're doing now? And when I look at, like, you talk about the down the field shots, this isn't, we looked at LSU last year and how they were throwing it around the yard. They didn't run a ton of like insane concepts down the field. But when I watch Alabama, Sarkisian's brought some of those NFL play action, those deep crossers. I mean, they ran the play to get Jalen Waddle open, like a corner and like a deep hook to get him open. Like, they're running some wild stuff down there. Do you ever wish you're like, I liked what I did 10 years ago, but maybe if I was in the shotgun, maybe if I had a little more spread, that would have been more fun for me.
I would have loved it. I mean, yeah, I was happy winning, obviously, the way we were winning back in the day. Yeah. But granted, we had Julio, and Julio was amazing. But we didn't necessarily have the weapons spread out the way that they have now. So it's a little bit different. We had great receivers. I wouldn't trade those guys for anything. But, admittedly, they weren't quite, on the level of a Waddle or perhaps even a Mechie as far as what they can do and the versatility they can display. So, I loved our group. I wouldn't change anything, but yeah, it would have been fun as a quarterback to play in this style of attack because you're keeping the pedal down all the time. And our whole approach when I was there was, hey, just be smart with the football. The only thing that can get us beat is turnovers. So just be smart. We're going to shorten the game. We're going to limit possessions. We're going to empower the offensive line. We're going to empower the run game. We're going to empower the defense and the quarterback. You just go stay in the corner and don't mess anything up. But now Nick Saban recognizes that you can't do that nowadays. So I did feel at times, a little frustrated because I wanted to be a part of the offense and do more. And my senior year, I got to do a little bit more, but that was mostly because we had to. Our defense wasn't quite as good. But it would have been really fun. But hey, I got a ring out of it. I'm proud to have played there for a couple of years, and I enjoyed what they asked me to do. And however I could have impacted the game, whatever it took to win, I didn't care. That's all that mattered to me.
Look, you're one of the few people in the world who has who's a starting quarterback on a BCS national championship team, even if you were under center I form most of the time. Okay, I wanted to ask you if you were stranded on a desert island and you had to have one pass concept come with you, and regardless of formation or personnel or anything, like what is the one that you in your sleep, you're like, I can always read out double slants or sail or four verts or whatever. Like what was your thing that you felt like you always had?
It's a good question. I mean, it'd probably be four vertical. I know it sounds simple, but like I think four verts gives you answers all the time, and probably 3x1 four verts if we're really going to get
we're talking about 3x1 four verts. So here we go.
So like that'd probably be it. I love the idea of reading that backside safety, and if you have a too high look, if that backside safety tries to poach front side and play number 3. Giving a one-on-one opportunity on the backside. Love that because we always had such a great X with Julio playing X, of course. Now we didn't see a ton of poach.
Just a future Hall of Famer playing X position.
We didn't see a ton of poach. Full disclosure, because you want to probably keep 2 there to your X, but working that that special, that 3x1 all vert special. Was a pretty neat throw. I loved it because against man coverage, if you have a really good guy at number 3 at running routes and creating separation, it almost becomes like an over route. Yep. And you can kind of bend it if you get that one high man coverage look. The one issue you would have would be 2-man, in which case I'll just work my running back balloon.
Yeah, exactly.
And just a 3-way go, whichever direction he wants to go. And I also, if that's covered up, I can run with it in 2-man. So outside of 2-man, that gives you answers. And my favorite throw in the world was throwing the seams between 18 and 22, 2 yards outside the hash. So I loved that throw. And if I got a 3 high and that free safety cheated over the 3x1 special on the over route, on the vertical route by number 3, I'd hit that seam up the middle and usually hit it in stride. If a corner collapsed, no problem. He probably is not going to get there, especially as I'm bringing him a little bit more towards the middle of the field. So I love that concept. It's tried and true. And it's a tough one to beat. If there's one other one though, I would probably say it would be like a 3x1. I love 3x1 in case you couldn't tell. 3x1.
You know what though? I looked these numbers up in the off season. Yeah, I think I might have just looked up the NFL, but 3x1 has taken over 2x2 as the most used formation in the NFL. So you're really not the only one. Like people are realizing how important it is to be in trips.
I think 3x1's better. I mean, personally, like you have clearly defined passing strength. You can get to quads by just shifting the running back in a heartbeat. Like it's just so
Kansas City Chiefs style. Just quads. I mean, oh, wait a minute, we're in quads. You didn't even realize.
Right. Well, I mean, you just throw the running back. Like you just switch sides to the running back. Just seeing you got quads and the defense has bells and whistles going off. Like it's awesome. It's stressful.
If you swing a back out on quads, the flat defender, it loses his mind. He can't deal with anything anymore. He's just like attracted to that running back now.
It's the greatest thing in the world. Like I love it. If I were calling plays, I would be almost exclusively 3x1. Or trio with Nub on the backside with the tight end into the boundary. So
you want to just be Dan Mullen, basically. That's pretty much.
I'm great with Nub. I'm great with Nub tight end. Like that to me causes all kinds of issues. But then also like if I were going to go 3x1, I like the idea of running. We used to have a concept with the X where because it could beat 2 high or 1 high. Basically you have your back free release into the flat 5-yard out route by the back. We have at times when we had a back that was comfortable doing it, had him on an option route so he can run 3-way go option. And then you have the inside release. You can either run a sail route. Yeah. That's against a post high safety, or you can break the post to cross face the safety. Like that was one of my favorite concepts. It just gave you so many answers. And I loved it. And then on the other side, you had like a 642 FN swing. So you had like a little 5-yard under, just indie, basically a little 5-yard under route by number 2. And that would be your number 3 in the progression. So he'd be in a shallow. And then I guess finally the greatest play of all time would be a short post. Like I'm a West Coast guy. I love the Zampese short post, Woody post, depending on what system you're in.
I think people call it arches too, if I'm not mistaken. Is that the same play?
I've never had that terminology. Okay. So basically you run, you can do 3x1, you can do 2x2. It's a 2-man concept for the most part. And if you put a third guy in it, you just have a trailer at the outside, and it's really a breeze. Number 3, or the inside of the 2, you kind of run it out of the stack. A lot of people hit it on the fly, on a motion or on an orbit motion. You have a shallow cross by number 3. And then number 2, the primary route, is running like an angle route. A short post is what it's called. 5 steps out at a 45-degree angle, then boom, cross face. So you're reading it inside out. You read shallow to the Woody post or the short post. And that, to me, you can do it with so many different looks. With running backs, you can do it with tight ends on the move. You can do it with slot receivers. You can do it in a 2x2 alignment, going from trio nub, motioning the Z across, and you can put him on the short post. I mean, there's just so many variations. So those would probably be like the 3 routes that I love more than anything else. Short post is so easy. And if you do it in 2x2, you just take that back and you just run him on a little wide route to the right, and that's your outlet. So it gives you a lot of answers, and it's really pretty easy as a quarterback to read through.
Yeah, I think that I believe that's like the Marshall Faulk route from The Greatest Show on Turf. Like they ran that. Yeah,
they definitely ran the heck.
Well,
out
I'm
of
sure
it.
they ran a whole bunch of different routes for Marshall Faulk. I want to talk about, you talked about the seam throw, and I made an analogy in an article I wrote I don't know, a few months ago, how it was like a soccer player taking a free kick, because that excitement, and you kind of expressed it in your words before, because it's like you have to get it over the linebackers, but then you have to drop it in underneath the safety. So it's like a free kick where you have to get it over the wall, but then you still have to be able to drop the ball in, past the goalie into the net. And that's like, it's a good feeling. Like, it really is a good feeling, because it's one of the harder, it's always open. Well, okay, maybe not always open with all the match coverages now, but it's there. It's just not so easy to throw it. And then, like you said, you have the safety squeeze it. You have the corner can squeeze it, overlap. You can have a guy, they can match it with the curl flat player and stuff like that. So yeah, I agree that throw is, as someone who is one of the best quarterbacks in Division 6 flag football, Montreal, Quebec, I totally understand.
The only thing that I don't like on the seams is like when they carry the seams. Like in some defenses, will carry the seams.
So
but you throw back shoulder if you have that look potentially. Like that's the only thing that can cause me some problems, or that collapsing, cover 3 corner that isn't threatened on the outside. Like those are the 2 problems. But if you have a pretty decent size slot player, tight end in particular, that's getting to the seams, you're not stopping it. If I hit it on time, and if I can get it up and down before 22 yards, and I'm going to get it right to our landmark, 2 yards inside the numbers or 2 yards outside the hash, wherever we're at on the field, it's really pretty easy. Because it's on time, man. It's no different than throwing any other route. It's a landmark route, even though you don't really intend it to be.
One of the things I noticed is, so you're talking about like the when they match the seams, one of the things I noticed was, if you go in trips, like we're talking about, especially in the NFL, less so in college because you have more too high safety looks, but in the NFL, they won't, one second you go on trips, like they're to the field side, they're not going to match they're just going to play spot drop zone, because they think the safety can shade over to that side. So like that's a way, like just going in trips, all of a sudden now you're freeing your slot runner to your seam runner to get free down the middle of the field. So yeah, I think trips is the present, and I think it's the future, along with my favorite thing, unbalanced formations, but we don't have to get into that now.
I'm not as big on the unbalanced stuff. We did plenty of it, and there's a place for it for sure. but it throws me off because I feel like as a quarterback, and that's because I'm just scarred. I went and lined up under the guard once in an unbalanced because you see it a million ways. You see it, from time to time. You walk up, and as soon as I went under my center or under my guard in practice, it was in practice. Thank God it wasn't in a game. But as soon as I went under center, under the guard, I've hated unbalance ever since. So,
have you ever done I did this when I was 12. Have you ever done the play is designed under center, and then you decide you see something or whatever happens, and you take a step back to be in gun, but you don't tell your center? Did that ever happen to you? And he just snaps the ball and the ball rolls around.
No, because it was pretty easy. Just a quick tap on the rear end if I was going gun. Like if we had double A gap pressure, like automatic gun.
100%. Yeah.
Even though I kind of liked being under center. You couldn't be lazy with your feet, but I felt like I could get the ball out faster under center than I could in gun because I couldn't always find the laces. Like under center short game, I was all about it, 100%.
I know a lot of quarterback coaches who will say in the off season or when they get a new quarterback into their program, the first thing they're going to do is teach them all under center stuff, just so they get the timing down, that they get the footwork down. You don't get lazy with your feet sometimes, because once you're under center, like you said, you got to go. Like you're too close to the people who want to beat you up,
right?
To not to have lazy feet. So I think that's a good lesson to learn. Like we got to, we want to be in gun. I understand that, but maybe we can practice a little under center.
Well, but it's like the age old thought. All right, well, if I'm a great golfer, for instance, let's say I'm an amazing wedge player. Like I'm really good with my wedges.
I don't know that at all. So I'm the worst golfer in the world.
Okay,
so
fair enough.
I'll pretend. I'll use my imagination right now.
But I think most people are like, well, I'm a pretty good ball striker. I'm good with my irons. That's because you go to the range and you practice your irons. Like, why don't you go over there and putt? Like, if you don't go over there and putt, you're probably going to stink at putting. When everyone that's listening to this that plays golf is probably like that. Like, I'm a terrible putter, but I'm pretty good with my irons. That's because you actually go to the range and bang your irons a million times. You never practice putting. Well, if I'm very comfortable in the shotgun, I do a good job in the shotgun, then why would I ever practice under center? No, it's having a fully well-rounded approach to the game. So I can't stress enough to young players how important it is to work your under center mechanics, because it can just make you a better player.
So I'm the opposite, because I've taken so many girls on first dates to the mini putt place. So I'm a great mini putter.
Good putter.
Great putter, but not down the field. So I wanted to get into, let's talk about some more SEC stuff. Mississippi State. Okay. This is crazy. Well, what's happening there, in my opinion, because it's obvious and then also crazy. I don't know. I have trouble wrapping my head around what's going on with the air raid there. Teams are just saying, well, we're not going to do anything but drop 8 guys. And it doesn't matter. I saw Texas A&M played cover 3 with it. I know some teams will play too high with it. It doesn't even matter what the coverage is. We're just going to put more people in zone than you have. And as you know this, there's no pass concept built to beat 8 people in coverage. It's always 7 or sometimes 6, right? Everything on the playbook is all, we're going to read a high-low on the Will or high-low on the Sam or whatever. It's now you have an extra player there, and it's tough, and the problems are exasperated, whatever the word is, by the fact that the O-line's a little shaky, so you can't just buy time in the pocket and then finally find someone like KJ Cassell has tried to do. Is it I don't want to say it's the end of the air raid, because it's been so good to football for 20 years now, 25 years now, this kind of true air raid style. But does he need to find more balance? Does he need to find, my thing is, does he need to find force the defense to give him a 4th defensive lineman?
Well, yes, but Mike Leach is a traditional air raid guy. The air raid it's
the most traditional. No one runs this anymore.
He's the only one left. There's no one else doing it like he does it. Sonny Dykes to a certain extent, but not even really. I mean, he's the last one. And literally, you talk to air raid guys that have broken off, and granted, Leach's tree is significant. But if you look at Oklahoma, the best example of a team that's having remarkable success, they actually run the ball 53% of the time since Lincoln Riley took over. So he's kicked out of the club because he runs it too much. Dana Holgerson kicked out of the club. He runs it too much. You talk to him, that's their whole thought process.
Lincoln pulls too many players to be air raid anymore.
It's just so yeah, right. So like when you look at, I mean, if you are completely abandoning the run, here's the thing about the air raid. There's two areas which the air raid's not good. One in the red zone, two to ice the game. So like if you can't play with, so you can't ice the game, you can't put it on ice because you're not built to play 4-minute offense and take the air to the ball. You also, when things get condensed and you're not able to spread the field the same way you used to when you're in the open field between the 20s, then you're not going to probably have a ton of success. And then you think about the length that defenders have in the SEC at all levels, like those windows are really small. So I don't think, unless he kind of abandons the traditional air raid philosophies, which I think is long overdue, he's probably not going to put up the numbers against the likes of SEC opponents. Like it might work in the Big 12. It might work in the Pac-12 where defenders are still pretty small, where defenders aren't overly skilled, but against rushes. The SEC team, no pass rush. You don't have to worry about edges as much. Like it's going to be a long look in the mirror in their offseason study. This year's a tough year. And hopefully they'll get better, because maybe you can chalk this up to not having a great grasp and understanding of what they're doing offensively because of the challenges COVID presented. But they need to adjust what they do and do it in a hurry, or else they're staring 1-9 in the face really quickly.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You can't find wins right now based on what they've done for the past 3 weeks, since LSU, since LSU put together not a good game plan against them. Like, let's just say it. It just wasn't the smartest thing to do. People make mistakes. It just wasn't the smartest thing to do. One of the things I looked up recently was the difference in 3-man rushes that they got the last 2 years when he was at Washington State compared to what they're getting now. So at Washington State, 2018 and 2019, only 30% on pass plays, defenses only rush 30% of the time, which is still high for most teams. But now it's at 62%, and that's including the LSU game where they did not do what the last 3 opponents have done. If you take out the LSU game, it's like 82%. So yeah. I almost think like the air raid might have been done for a couple of years now, and Pac-12 defenses kind of like propped it up like a weekend at Bernie's type of situation, and like allowed it to be good. The other thing I want to ask you, so I also, when I look at how defenses are just built right now, you have this new odd front, this new tight front where you have 3 players kind of inside the tackles. So it's like, yeah, it's an odd front. It's like 3-4, but it's different and whatever. And I kind of feel, I don't know what you think about this. So even if they're giving you a light box and you're the air raid and you're telling your quarterback, if you see the light box, check to it or whatever, check to a run, the defense is set up to just kill inside zone because they have 3 guys. So it's like, the defense has like kind of inadvertently caught on to what the air raid wants to do. And I agree with you. 1-9, like you gotta just go like 70-30 pass run. Not 50-50, because that'll never happen, but like 70-30, something like that. Yeah.
I mean, and I don't know if they will. Like, don't get me wrong, like the 4 eyes on defense are a problem too. So they have all sorts of issues, and you can't run on the perimeter because your receivers aren't good blockers. And then you also, it's the SEC. Yeah. Running on the perimeter ain't happening in the SEC. It just doesn't happen.
Right, and that's exactly what defenses do now with this new wave of 3 safety, tight front. It's like we're going to clog every interior lane. We're not going to let the running back get ahead of steam vertically. We're going to force the ball, as the people say, like force the ball to roll off the table or whatever it's called, force the ball to bounce, and then we're going to chase it down because we have so much speed. I mean,
it's also too like if you look at the SEC, the teams that don't have elite level speed, you have to go pin and pull, and like pin and pull in the run game is not something that we've ever really seen from Mike Leach.
No,
so
never,
he's going to have to adapt, and he's going to have to unless he can go out and recruit genuine speedsters. They're going to have to adjust and add a few wrinkles into their rushing attack and their run game playbook.
Let's move on to an interesting case at quarterback, which is Auburn Tigers quarterback Bo Nix. Has he developed in any way that you thought he would develop? Has he stagnated? Last year, true freshman season, yes, he won SEC Freshman of the Year, but maybe not. We knew he needed to develop. Like, we knew that. And then you had the game last week. You had the bird's eye view. Did you see that? Obviously they lost, but was there anything to hang your hat on if you're Bo Nix in that offense?
I think they have an elite level running back in Tank Bigsby. I really like him. I think their offensive line is a work in progress. And hopefully they'll get better as the season goes along. But Bo Nix is not comfortable in the pocket right now. He leaves way too soon. I mean, he takes like one hitch. The guy has zero presence in the pocket. I mean, and it's honestly frustrating to watch. Like, stay in the pocket, hang in there. I don't know if he can't see or he doesn't trust his protection or what, but first sign of disruption and or chaos in the front, he's gone. I mean, sprint right, throw it off his back foot, and you just can't be consistently accurate like that. Like, Chad Morris was brought in to bring along that passing game, and so far, Bo Nix hasn't come along and gotten comfortable with it whatsoever. Now, they did have some challenges in camp, like had an offensive line, guys that were out for COVID, all this other stuff. But the receivers, I don't think did a very good job of separating last week. And Bo Nix is not real inherently accurate because every single throw he makes is off his back foot, and it's in an effort to leave the pocket.
One of the things I noticed, I don't know if you noticed the same thing, even on like quick game throws, he needs to see it. Like, it has to be there in front of him wide open. He won't anticipate or throw a guy open, just even on a slant. And it's like, you gotta get there at some point. You know what I mean?
Oh, he also has such a sidearm release too. Like, he's so sidearm that I think it's really hard to be accurate and consistent when you are that sidearm. We see it with Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson also very sidearm, very inconsistent, streaky as can be. But when he's hot, he's hot. But when he's not, it's ugly. And he misses a lot of throws as a result of that sidearm motion.
Yeah, I agree completely with the sidearm stuff. The thing that gets Lamar over the top, I think, obviously, just so happens that he can like run past anyone on the field. But I think he really, and maybe Petrino did a good job with this. He really like understands the structure of whatever pass concept. It's like, 1, 2, 3, hitch, going through his progressions with his eyes, and then he'll take off and run. So he can always like find the open receiver, even if the ball isn't. I agree with you, and I think the sidearm has a lot to do with that and not being super accurate with his throws like that.
No, it does. I mean, and Lamar, when he's hot, though, I mean, look out. he'll carve you up.
I think one of the things that I didn't realize was, and I do this a lot with a bunch of quarterbacks, but like when they're coming out of college, I'm like, oh, okay, well, you can't do that against NFL teams, NFL defenses, and it's like, no, I'm just better than everyone on the field, so I can do it against. Like, Mahomes was the same way. It was like, oh, well, you can't break the pocket and do all that stuff against NFL teams, and it's like, oh yeah, I guess you can. It
translates more than people want to admit.
Yeah, it's wild. All right, thanks for coming on, Greg. This was a great conversation, and maybe we'll have to do it again sometime soon.
Sounds good, man. Look forward to that. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, so like I said at the beginning, super fun conversation. I think it's just nice to just like, for me at least, it's just nice to like talk football. Like I don't. This is like all I want to do in every day, 24/7 is talk football. So we got to do that this week. Also, just wanted to shout out the winner of last week's raffle. Let me get his name here. That is, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, Bryce Rossler. You are the raffle winner. So shoot me an email and I will get you your prize. Thanks. And see you guys next week.
Thanks for watching the PFF YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe, all you have to do is push the button. Don't forget everything you get. A little fantasy, push the button. A little green line for the gambling aspects of the game, push the button. College football, push the button. The YouTube channel from PFF.